Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back to Promotech. Thanks for tuning in. Today it's the Pixel 11 Pro Fold, and this launch matters way more than the keynote made it look because Google didn't just refresh the shape, they rewired the parts that actually failed people the last 2 years. The parts that decide whether this thing survives daily use, who actually benefits from the changes, and what it tells us about where every future Pixel Foldable is headed. Let's dive right into the video, because once you see what's actually different here, the keynote highlights start looking like a distraction from the real story. Start with the modem, because if you've owned a Pixel Fold before, you already know the pain point, the constant battery drain from the phone hunting for signal instead of holding it. For 2 generations straight, Google leaned on Samsung's Exynos modem inside these foldables. And it was the quiet reason so many owners watched their battery percentage crater by mid-afternoon for no obvious reason. This year, that supplier gets dropped entirely, replaced by MediaTek. That's Google admitting, without ever saying it in a press release, that the modem was the actual bottleneck, not the folding design, not the battery size, the modem itself. The people who win here are anyone who's ever babysat their phone's battery through a normal workday. The people who lose, at least short-term, are early adopters who now become the real-world test group for whether this fix actually holds up outside a controlled demo. And here's the cliffhanger worth sitting with. If this modem swap genuinely kills the signal hunting problem, that means every complaint about Tensor battery life going back years was never really about Tensor at all. It was about a chip Google never even designed themselves. Now look at the security chip, because this one sounds boring until you understand what it's actually defending. The Titan M3 module in this phone adds post-quantum cryptography, which is a fancy way of saying it's built to resist a level of computing power that doesn't fully exist commercially yet, but is coming faster than most people assume. Almost nobody buying this phone today will notice this feature working, and that's exactly the point. It's not solving a 2026 problem. It's insurance against a 2031 problem, protecting whatever banking data, passwords, and stored credentials you're carrying 5 to 10 years from now. The people who benefit most are anyone who keeps a phone for years instead of flipping it annually, and the people who'll never think about it twice are casual upgraders who trade in every cycle anyway. But zoom out, and the signal is bigger than the feature itself. Google is now engineering security hardware for a Pixel that's expected to still be trusted with your real financial life half a decade from now, not just your camera roll. And that's a strange thing to prioritize on a foldable specifically, a category that's historically been treated like a showcase device rather than something built to last, which tells you Google now sees the Fold line the same way they see their flagship slab phones. Then there's the camera bar, and this is where the redesign gets sneaky. Both lens covers now stretch all the way to the right edge, swallowing the microphone and flash housing that used to sit separately. The flash slides over to the left, and the telephoto lens swaps position to the right. But the detail that actually matters is that these glass covers now protrude outward from the aluminum bar instead of sitting flush like before. That's not a free design choice. Protruding glass catches on pockets, bags, and cases more easily, and it's a more expensive repair if it cracks. So why do it? Because a flush design was choking how much sensor stack Google could physically fit inside a chassis that's already fighting hinges and dual batteries for space. That protrusion is Google betting you'll baby this phone in a case rather than toss it in a bag loose. And buried in that same flash module is a new RGB LED feature called Highlight, which tells you Google is pushing this camera bar to do more creative work than any previous Fold generation attempted. Compare that to the Pixel 10 Pro Fold's flush camera housing, and you can see exactly where the extra millimeters of thickness on this year's folded body actually went. It's not padding, it's the price of a bigger sensor stack Google decided was worth the trade-off. Now let's talk about the part almost nobody covers properly, the actual processor architecture, because Tensor G6 isn't just a name bump this year. Google moved to a 7-core layout built on the new ARM Cortex-C1 series, a single C1, Ultra-core paired with 6 C1 Pro cores, and that's a real departure from the mixed big-middle-little setups of previous Tensor chips. Pair that with an Imagination PowerVR GPU that's specifically modified for power efficiency rather than raw output. And the whole chip starts looking less like a benchmark chaser and more like Google finally admitting that thermal headroom inside a folding chassis is the real limiting factor, not raw horsepower. That matters because previous Tensor chips inside Fold devices would throttle hard under sustained load, gaming, video export, anything demanding, precisely because there was nowhere for the heat to go in that thin folded body. If this efficiency-first GPU choice holds up under real testing, that's Google quietly conceding that past fold chips were overbuilt for a form factor that could never cool them properly. Last one. And it's the upgrade you'll actually feel every single time you unlock this thing, the displays. The cover screen finally picks up LTPO, meaning it can drop its refresh rate down when you're just glancing at a notification instead of burning battery, holding 120 Hz nonstop. And both the cover and the inner folding display now hit 3,600 nits at peak brightness. That number matters because Pixel folds have historically struggled outdoors. Glare washing out the screen at the exact moment you need it, like checking directions in the middle of a sunny street. Pushing brightness on both panels, not just the external one, tells you Google now treats the inner fold display as the primary screen, not the secondary party trick it used to feel like. The people who win are anyone who's cursed at a washed-out fold screen in daylight. But higher brightness ceilings also mean more heat, and heat is already the tightest constraint inside a chassis this thin. So this is a bet Google is clearly confident enough to make out loud, especially paired with that new efficiency-focused GPU we just talked about, because those two decisions only make sense together. One more thing worth sitting with before we wrap this up, the battery and charging situation, because on paper 4,806 mAh doesn't sound huge for a device this size, until you remember it's split across a chassis that also has to fit two full displays, a hinge mechanism, and now a more power-hungry brightness ceiling. Paired with 25-watt wireless charging through Qi 2.2, Google is clearly betting that the modem efficiency gains and the smarter GPU offset a battery capacity that hasn't grown much year over year. That's either a confident engineering call or a corner being cut quietly. And honestly, we won't know which until battery benchmarks start rolling in against the Pixel 10 Pro Fold under identical conditions. So here's where this actually lands, because the modem swap, the quantum-ready security chip, the camera bar redesign, the efficiency-first chip architecture, and the brightness jump across both displays aren't random spec bumps scattered across a spec sheet. They're Google going back and quietly fixing, or at least attempting to fix, every real complaint that's followed this line since the very first fold. Real quick, because I mean this, over 70% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. And that's honestly surprising, because if you made it this far into a breakdown this detailed, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. Hitting subscribe just puts you in that smaller group, actually catching these changes before they become common knowledge. Now, if all 5 of these fixes hold up once real-world reviews and battery tests start rolling in over the coming weeks, that's Google finally treating the Fold line like a true flagship instead of a side experiment. And that raises a bigger question about what happens next. Because a device corrected this deliberately doesn't usually get corrected again the following year unless something about the thermals or the battery still isn't enough once people are actually living with it daily. So tell me down in the comments, do you think this is the generation where the Pixel Fold finally stops apologizing for itself, or is there still one flaw nobody's caught yet? Take care and stay safe. I'll see you in the next one soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.